name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Ozark Season 4. And this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. Now, lots of people love this TV show, and I really don't care for it at all. I think it's very bland, very generic, and has just done nothing for me, but I decided to finish off with Season 4, and this season begins with this terrible car accident scene. It's meant to get me to be like, oh, how did it get to that point? But it's just a car crash. It can happen at any time. It doesn't get me invested, it doesn't get me intrigued, so I was just like, okay, so this season's gonna be yet another bad season of television. But after that bad opening scene, the show gets better immediately. In fact, I'll say that the first half of this season is the show at its very peak. You actually took what was established with each character and their relationships and used it to create drama. Everyone had clear goals and motivations, and it was just that kind of intertwining character drama that I really loved. I loved seeing Ruth on the opposite side of the boards now. I liked how Jonah connected with Ruth over his relationship with Ben. And you actually do feel the weight of Ben being gone. And when Wendy starts to use Ben to push her agenda, how she just pushes Jonah farther away to the point where Jonah helps Ruth out. And I thought that was a great direction to take these characters. And I was invested at that point. You know, there's even one moment where Wendy tries to set Ruth and Jonah up. And by doing something so awful, she pushes Jonah even farther away. And then I also liked how Ruth was trying to impress Darlene due to her relationship with Wyatt, which is still very weird. Like, very, very weird. But when Ruth eventually does impress Darlene and Darlene's proud of her, you feel happy for Ruth. You feel like she accomplished something. I also like how they went farther with pushing Marty's humanity and how Wendy becomes more of the villain in the first half of this season. I like how we see that Marty is still trying to be a dad, but the lines between running this money laundering business and being a dad is blurred. You know, he can't tell Jonah not to do it because he's watched him do it. So he feels responsible for that, but he still doesn't want his son to get involved in this kind of stuff. I did like the added new threat of the private investigator looking for Helen. The actor Adam Wassenberg I thought was a good addition to the show. You've also got Navarro, and I thought everything involving him in the first half of this season was really great. He's unpredictable, and you never know where his loyalties lie. One moment he's telling Harvey that he doesn't care about the boards and he'll help him out, and then one moment he's telling the boards the exact same thing. So he's a very unpredictable character, you're just trying to figure him out. And I did like Harvey in this season. And I did get some very creepy vibes from him with Charlotte in a few moments. And I do like the fact that we see just how unhinged Darlene is and how she becomes more and more of an enemy of the boards. There's one confrontation scene between Darlene and Wendy which I absolutely loved. While Darlene starts to suffer a heart attack, and for a second Wendy panics, but then she just puts her phone away and just watches her as she's freaking out. I thought that was a really great moment. In fact, maybe one of the best moments of the show. And I also liked how we have this whole relationship with Darlene and Wyatt is starting to see more and more just how unhinged Darlene is. And whatever the first half was building to, I knew it was building to something great. Just all the pieces were putting into place, and I'm just like, where is this going? And then after Darlene kills Frank Sino and Wyatt freaks out, him and Ruth plan to just leave. And I'm just like, okay, where's this going? And then Ruth tells Frank Jr. about what happened to his dad. And then Wyatt changes his mind on leaving Darlene. So I'm like, oh, this is building to something really great. Ruth is accidentally going to get Wyatt killed. And it was building to that so perfectly. I'm just like, you know what? This final season might be a great final season. And I was in, and then they just did not go forward with that, and that is when the decrease in quality immediately comes. Instead of having Frank Jr. kill Wyatt and Darlene, which was getting built up to so perfectly, would have added some more depth and emotion to Ruth's character, they just got Harvey to kill them. And that is infinitely less interesting. I don't know if it's a case of them trying to subvert your expectations, but if it were, they succeeded. I was expecting something great and impactful, and what I got was something that I just didn't care about. And I said this in one of my other reviews, but Ruth losing people that she loves is so overdone at this point. It really is. The first season ends with her losing her uncle, she gets him killed. The second season ends with Ruth losing her dad. The third season ends with her losing her boyfriend. And then the first half of season 4 ends with her losing Wyatt. And it's just like, oh, so this is the only thing that you know what to do with this character. Just by killing off people she loves. And when Wyatt died, I honestly felt nothing. Just nothing. I didn't really care for Wyatt as a character. He wasn't one of the most interesting ones. But I would have cared if it was Ruth's fault. That would have been good. And Julia Garner is great in this scene, but I just didn't like the direction they took here. Like, they could have at least made it more interesting that if Harvey is the one to kill them, that he was there because Wendy sent him there to take down the signs of Ben or something like that. And then Ruth finds that out and she swears to kill Marty and Wendy. That would have been a great way to end this show. So you still could have done that, but instead they took the least interesting route. And I never really cared for the characters of Frank Jr. and Frank Sr. So this way they would have had a war in the story, but Frank Sr. dies, and then Frank Jr. just does nothing about it. So it's just like, well, what did they add to this show? And the answer is nothing. So I was hoping that the second half of the season could at least make for a strong finale, and it's just more of the same issues. And I think this was a terrible way to end the show. And Ruth kills Harvey within the first episode of the second half. And it's just so underwhelming. Like, you were building so well, and to have her succeed so soon, you killed all momentum, and you're just like, well, where do we go from here? And they could have played it off in more interesting ways. Like, what if Marty killed Harvey to protect Ruth? You know, that would be a progression of his character as he's trying to hold on to his humanity. And it shows that he does care for her. And then Navarro is after Marty for the second half of the show. Or what if Navarro retaliates and tries to get Ruth killed, but then Jonah, because he's working with Ruth, gets killed as well. Or instead, and then because of that, Marty and Wendy want to take down Navarro entirely. Like, there's so many interesting directions that they could have taken, and they just took the least interesting one. The show refuses to do anything good. So with Harvey dead so early on in the second half, the show just feels like a giant drag. They keep building to the boards getting out of everything, but that's the same as every other season. Season 2, Marty's like, okay, if we get this casino built, then we're done. Season 3, same thing. So it's just like, what's different about this season? And then Navarro's sister becomes the main villain in the second half, and I just thought she was a really boring, underwhelming character. I think introducing a villain for the last bunch of episodes was a bad decision. They reintroduce Rachel, and when I saw her, I'm just like, who is that? Is that Darlene's kid? Because she looked almost exactly like Darlene when she came back, but then I looked it up. I'm like, Rachel. Who's Rachel again? Oh, right, that's the girl from the first 2 seasons. And I'm just starting to think, what happened to her again? Because I remembered that she crashed, and then she was wild, and her and Marty kissed, and then I was just trying to figure out, what happened to her again? it just shows you how little impact these characters in this show has. And then the whole friendship of her and Ruth becoming super close, I didn't really buy into at all. And then once again, like the show always does, they backtrack Marty's humanity once again, and they get him to kill an innocent person. So once again, they throw away any progression of his character. Wouldn't it have been great at this point in the show, Marty's like, no, I'm not going to do this, and he kills someone with the cartel instead? Because we've already been down this path with him. And then later, it just seems like the show tends to think that he's just as bad as Wendy, and I reject that. Wendy loves this. She loves being the villain. It's what she does. Marty seems to actually want to get out and trying to find ways to get out, and he has been on a path of growing his humanity. And the fact that he just refuses to stand up to anyone makes it very difficult to root for Marty this far into the show. There's a point at the end of the first half of the season where Ruth has a gun at him and he just takes it. Wendy constantly undermines and emasculates him every opportunity she gets, and he just takes it. This isn't an interesting character. He just takes everything and he doesn't react. And that's where good drama comes from. I do like that scene where he has really bad word rage because it shows his built up frustrations. But then it just goes nowhere once again afterwards. They just resort him back to the same old Marty. And he still does anything for Wendy. Like, it's not like the romance between the two of them is ever really present. They only ever talk business. If we had a few moments of them at home where it's pure and good and you can see that they're really in love, then you'd understand why he'll do anything that he asks her to. But you don't get those moments, so you just get frustrated at Marty. And then Wendy is just a terrible garbage person, and I always hated her. And the show tries to make it seem like she grows or anything, but her checking herself into the mental hospital was so manipulative. Like, maybe it would have been better if she actually went a little nuts and she went in and they didn't allow her to check out or something like that. But no, she checks in for sympathy points, and then when the kids go to visit her, she just continues to manipulate them. She's an unlikable, evil person, and the show wants me to root for her. And then we get this 7-minute long flashback of Ben. Why? I don't know. It wasn't needed. This show really doesn't respect the viewer's time at all, because you should try to keep it as short and as tight as possible, and then they just add these 7 minutes for no reason. And then they introduce Wendy's dad. He comes into the picture to try to make us feel bad for Wendy, but you see right through the manipulative tactics of the show. She's just too far gone at this point. And everything that her dad adds to the show, I just thought was unneeded. I thought it was frustrating. And the whole plot of the kids going away with him, and if he was actually a good person, would have been all the more compelling. But no, they had to make him a bad guy to get rid of any morally gray area. Ruth being in charge of the casino, I didn't really care for that plot. Wyatt dies in the first half of this season, and you don't really seem to ever think about him again afterwards. Like, Ruth does see him again, but you don't really feel the weight of Wyatt being gone, because it really doesn't put the characters on a new path. It's just like, oh, just another obstacle to overcome, just like everything else in this show. Like, deaths don't really impact the characters in this show. If you take something like Last of Us Part 2, yes, I reference this show all the time, but for good reason. When Joel dies, it impacts everyone for the rest of the story. What killing him did to Abby, what his death affected Ellie, you feel the weight of his loss throughout every second of that game. And you got someone as important to Ruth as Wyatt. And you don't ever really kill. They're sad for a day, then they get over it seems like. And then Nelson gets killed by Rachel, who's never fired a gun before, which, yeah, I don't really buy, but at the same time, it's not like Nelson was a good character. A few other negatives I have of the second half of this season is, I wish they let the characters talk. You know, there's a few times where Marty and Ruth are talking, and, you know, they had a good partnership at the beginning of this show. There should be some emotion there. Their talk should have been a lot more heartfelt. And it just doesn't have any bit of emotional relevance. And then there's also one moment where Darlene shoots a guy, and it was just, the sound was completely off. Heavy ADR. But let's talk about the last episode now, because the last episode is absolutely terrible. Now keep in mind, as of now, I have not seen Game of Thrones, but from my understanding, that is the worst series finale. And for me, the worst series finale is How I Met Your Mother, and this is right behind it. I think this show just ended really, really poorly. Just terrible. So the episode begins, and it seems like they're treating Ruth like she's a bad person. Like the boards haven't absolutely ruined her life. And it's just like they want to hold everyone responsible but the board. And it's really frustrating to watch. And Marty just goes up to Ruth, and it's just like, it's your fault my kids don't want to be with me. So you gotta fix this, or I'm gonna get you killed. I hated that decision. It makes Marty unlikable. And it's just a bad decision in every single possible way. So instead of Marty having to put in the work to get his kids back, Ruth does it, so that's pathetic. And she shoots at the dad, and then the dad's just like, oh well, I guess I'll let them have their kids back. It's just very stupid. So then the kids visit Wendy at the mental hospital, and she still just manipulates them. But they decide to go back with their mom and dad, and it just seems like everything's good again. But don't forget the car accident! That's right, the car accident we saw at the beginning of this season. How are they going to pay off? What's going to happen as a result of it? And the answer is absolutely nothing. It comes out of nowhere, doesn't really affect the characters, and the story goes on. Completely unneeded. But to make things even worse, the bit of relevance it does add to the characters is that Wendy's like, oh, we all survived. This means we are good people and we deserve to live. Fuck that. Honestly. And so anyways, then the sister is talking to Claire, and she's like, do you know what happened to Harvey? And Claire tells her. And then she turns to the board, did you know this? And Claire's like, no. And then she tells the board, you can't interfere. And this would have been a great way to end the finale if Marty's like, no, I know we're so close, but that girl has helped us out so much. We gotta try to save her. And if Marty died trying to save Ruth, like that would have been a much better. I know it's going to be the crowd pleaser ending, but I actually do think it works in context of the story and the characters. He would have at least redeemed himself a little bit. And if they found a way to kill Wendy as well, like that would have been a much better ending, but nope. Instead, they just let Ruth die like she meant nothing to them. Marty trusted her and said that if anything happens to us, can you take care of our kids? And she said yes, and he just lets her die? No, they're already unlikable, but in letting Ruth die, they become infinitely more unlikable. And then Ruth just stands there and lets herself get killed. I know some people are like, oh, her death was in character because she says some swear words. But no, she just lets herself get killed. Absolutely pathetic. A weak way to end one of the best characters in this show. And then the PI dude comes back and you're like, okay, so he's going to be the one to hold the boards responsible. And he's just like, there was something funny about that cookie jar. Why did he think that? I don't know. Like, Ruth didn't want to give him cookies. That's it. And then Jonah kills him. You kidding me? Jonah, the one who hated what his parents were doing, who wanted to stay out of it, who thought that all of this stuff was incredibly messed up. The show ends with him killing the guy and they get away scot-free. That's the ending. Like, it's so out of character for Jonah to a laughable degree, but like, that's just it. Ruth is the one character who should have found redemption and another chance at life and find a way to keep going. And she's the only one who dies. And the boards just get off scot-free. They're never held accountable, they're never held responsible, and we're supposed to be happy about this? No, absolutely not. They don't deserve a happy ending. You know, if you take a show like Breaking Bad, spoiler alert for Breaking Bad, but it ended perfectly. Walt, the one who deserved to die, dies in an act of redemption to save Jesse, and he gets away. Perfection. Love it. Phenomenal. You know, if you take an ending like BoJack Horseman, which is my second favorite series finale, you feel the weight of everything the characters have gone through, and it says something profound about life, there's accountability, and there's real emotion present. Dark, another great series finale. You can argue it cheated a little bit, but I don't even care because it still works story-wise, on an emotional level, and you feel like it wrapped everything up so perfectly. It's a beautiful ending. This one pretends that the bad people are still good, so you can't connect to it morally. There's no emotion. Ruth dies for the sake of her dying. There's no accountability, no ideals or themes present. You don't feel the weight of anything that has happened in this last season, yet alone the entire show. You just feel nothing. And the worst part is, it doesn't feel like a series finale. It feels like this could have been another season finale and there's another season coming. Look, I really dug the first half of this season. I thought the character drama and just the way the story was progressing was the most invested I was in this show. But then they just did something stupid at the end of that first half, and you see the ramifications up until the end of this show. They had nowhere left to turn. They had no emotion. There was no tension. It just ended in the most underwhelming, lackluster ways. I just watched it and I'm just like, that's it? That's the finale? You know, I will say the performances are great here, but the script was really bad for this last season. So I'm going to go ahead and give Ozark Season 4 a 4 out of 10. Fitting to give Season 4 a 4 out of 10. Just really worked out that way. But did you see Ozark Season 4? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.